everybody. Welcome back to Men Need to Be Heard. It's Dan, and we've got another awesome show for you this week. About 2 months ago, I was on TikTok, and I ran across a video which actually went viral, in which a gentleman was talking about what had happened to him, which was a false allegation, and how I believe it was the sheriff's department showed up to serve him. And I actually shared that video and made commentary on it myself. Mine started to go viral. And we happened to connect and started talking with each other. And I wanted to have him on the show to talk about really what it is that happens when these type of allegations are made. They're known as the silver bullet in divorce world. You'll hear sometimes them be referred to as the magic bullet in some places. And basically it's where one party or the other, it's not always the women doing it to the men, but the majority of the time it is. But it's where one party or the other makes an allegation of abuse or domestic violence or some sort of thing like that. And then next thing you know, they're off and running to the races with it. So I wanted to have my friend, Ulysses Slaughter, on. Ulysses, how are you, my friend?
I'm just doing really well, man. In the strangest kind of way, as I said earlier, this what was supposed to be a tragedy has opened my world to some incredible people like you. And I can't say that I would do it all over again, but I
Mm.
will say that there are some real fruits to the labor that I've undertaken, and budding relationships like this represent that fruit. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you for coming on and thank you for being willing to share your story because a lot of guys, frankly, are afraid to share that story. And understandably so, I'm not knocking them in any way. It's a difficult situation to be in. I'll be honest and upfront, I've never been in that situation, but I have worked with guys, hundreds at this point, who have been through it, are going through it, even now. In fact, I shared your video with a few of the people that I coach right now. And they were like, wow, I guess it's not just me, because most of the time guys think it's just them. But we're going to
Right.
dive into all that. Ulysses, can you talk a little bit about who you are, what it is you do, anything you want to share about yourself?
And again, I appreciate that as well, because when people see you pop up on social media and you're not a recognizable face, they don't know who you are, where you've come from. They don't know anything about you. And so when given an opportunity to talk about myself, I want people to understand kind of where I came from, who I am, and who I was before that fateful day back in August of 2021. That video is 2 years old.
Really? I
It
didn't
took
know
me,
that. 2 years, it's two
yeah,
years ago. Okay. I thought it
that
was
was
actually
2 years
recent.
ago.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So it was a very strategic move on my part to wait until I had figured out exactly what was going on. And I think I know what was going on. I didn't want to be impulsive and right away put that video up. As a matter of fact, the PFA stipulated, the protection from abuse stipulated in the first 6 months that I was not to do a certain kind of social media. And
Really?
I didn't challenge that because, like I said, I wanted to see what was going on. So let me go back to the question of who I am, where I come from. I'm originally from Chicago, born and raised in Chicago. I now live outside the city of Philadelphia. As I mentioned to you earlier, off air, I'm a filmmaker, I'm a writer, I am a campaign manager, not political campaigns, but I do all kinds of social justice, racial justice, environmental justice campaigns. And so I developed these campaigns because I believe that it is my responsibility to leave the world better than I found it. And so I'm a Navy veteran. I spent 6 years in the Navy. I got to Philadelphia from Chicago when I joined the Navy back in 1990. Uh, my background is in journalism, public relations, filmmaking. I do a lot of campaigns. And I should mention this, I am the father of six incredible children, ranging in age from 18 to 34. And they are my inspiration. And so somebody wants to learn more about the work that I do, they can go to my website. It is ulyssesbutchslaughter.com, and you can explore some of the work that I've been engaged with. Um, I don't know how many people are familiar with what is called the move bombing. The move bombing took place in the city of Philadelphia back in 1985 when the city of Philadelphia dropped a bomb on a row home in West Philadelphia and killed 11 people. It was back in 1985. I was still in Chicago at the time. As it turns out, in 2018, because I have a very strong skill in different kinds of reconciliation scenarios, I was asked to work with the former mayor of Philadelphia and family members from the family that died to create a reconciliation process.
Hmm.
That process ultimately led to me writing the official apology for the move bombing of 1985. That happened in May 2020 is when City Council of Philadelphia accepted the proposal that I wrote.
Wow.
Um, I've done work with international sex positive organizations. I created a reconciliation council for a company called One Taste. One Taste is was an international sex positive organization that is now under investigation by the FBI for some things that they decided to do that I highly recommended that they did not do. But I'm trying to point to who I was and what I was doing
Hmm.
before these things happened. And the other thing that I should mention that's crucial in my story, growing up in Chicago at the age of 12, I listened as my father shot and killed my mother, Clarice.
Wow.
I was 12 years old when it happened. I wound up being the chief witness against my father at the age of 12. Um, my life has been dedicated primarily to my mother's memory. And so, domestic violence, an advocate against domestic violence, I've been that my entire life. And so, when I found myself being accused of something that is not even a part of my tapestry, not even a part of my fabric, I felt it was one of the highest levels of betrayal
Hmm.
that I could ever imagine that this woman would attempt on me. Um, my mother's life, my mother's memory means everything to me. And in a way, so does my father's memory for a different kind of way. And I've stood against domestic violence my entire life. Um, and I will continue to do that. Recently, it has changed in that I am now starting to understand kind of the other side of the male female dynamic of abuse.
Hmm.
And it's something that I am going to be campaigning for probably for the rest of my life. I feel like I've been talking forever.
Well, it's we have a lot in common, my friend, and it's not just the beautiful bald heads. Okay.
And they are
Um,
beautiful.
first of all, let me say thank you for your service to the Navy and for all the other work that you do. That's amazing. I actually am familiar with the bombing. I do. I remember when it happened. I think it was 1984, five, somewhere in there, right?
1985. Yep.
Yep, I was just coming out of college when that happened. Um, but it's funny you talk about domestic violence. I'm a former peer counselor for domestic violence, working primarily with men. And much like you, I was kind of on the quote unquote other side of it. Um, but having been a victim of it myself, kind of opened my eyes. And then working with the guys, and then you realize that it's not really a gender problem; it's a people problem. It
It
really
is.
is, and it's what I've dedicated my life to. It's why this podcast exists, is amongst other things, raising awareness that domestic violence is a serious issue, that every victim deserves help, no matter whether
Right.
they're man, woman, any race, creed, color. I don't care. Um, so I appreciate you for doing that as well. Ulysses, I want to kind of jump in now, if you don't mind, and kind of talk about what happened. So you said it was about 2 years ago.
2 years
Uh,
ago.
and for those that haven't seen the video, I will put a link to the actual video, which is on Ulysses TikTok, down below in the show notes. So you can actually go watch it as a frame of reference. But I remember the first time I saw it, which was, I want to say early August, if I remember right. And To be honest with you, I watched it 4 or 5 times in a row. Uh, Not that I was like shocked because I've heard that same story hundreds of times, but just seeing someone talk about it so eloquently, I think, is what struck me more than anything else. And how you address the police officers that were doing it the way it should be done, to be honest with you, because a lot of guys think that screaming and yelling is going to get them somewhere. It's not. So, can you kind of talk about, first of all, the overall situation? You came home, I guess, and got served. If we can just take it from there and kind of talk about it.
Well, I was already at home,
Okay.
and that was August the 4th when it happened. I was at home, and Dan, I keep a collection of text threads that go back from I'm sorry, July the 14th, 2021, up until August the 4th when I was evicted, 2021. And sometimes when people ask me about whether or not I saw this coming and what were the signs and all of that, of course, now I can go back and I can say, okay, maybe that was a sign, maybe that was a sign,
Mm-hmm.
maybe that was a sign. But in relationships, a lot of the times we're trying to navigate what's happening to us in real time as opposed to looking for signs of impending collapse. And so we're trying to figure out how to work things out. And when I look at these text threads, I remember moments where my wife was talking about growing into menopause and how she was concerned about whether or not she would be okay. And she had sent me an article about uh, whether or not a divorce could last through menopause. The article was called Will Your Marriage Survive Menopause?"
Hmm.
And then she also sent me a guide, a 4-step guide for husbands surviving perimenopause. Now, this is on July the 14th. And I took the text thread, and I strung them all together. And I started looking at from July the 14th up until the 29th when she went and filed divorce. I had no idea that she had
Mm-hmm.
filed for divorce. I didn't learn that she had filed for divorce until I actually got papers early morning, very early morning, August the 4th, I believe it was, which would be the same that I got evicted.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I actually got an email from her attorney that had the divorce documents. And I'd say 30 to 45 minutes before the state troopers came to evict me from the house, a courier showed up with the paper packet
Yep.
of divorce documents. So this was a well crafted, well thought out um, plan.
Yeah, and a point,
And
if I may, real quick, just to make is what you're hearing Ulysses talk about, I've heard hundreds of times. This is not something that's a one off. This is
no,
exactly what happened. So I want everyone to pay attention to what he's saying right now because, gentlemen, if you're listening to this and you think you're happily married, the surprise may just level you, just to be blunt with you. I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
no, it's okay. And I think that your point really needs to be underscored and understood that you can think that everything is okay. And as one attorney said to me, when they are moving towards setting you up, they want you to think that everything is okay.
They'll go out of their way to do that. A common thing you'll hear, by the way, from guys is our sex life suddenly got better.
Right,
We were doing, she started holding my hand. That is all part of the game, right?
right.
I know of instances where this was planned out 6, 8, 12 months in advance. Yours sounds
Mhm.
like maybe not quite that much. I don't know. We'll get into that. But this is very common. And that's why people that are listening really pay attention here because you kind of talked about you started in retrospect 2020 hindsight's 2020, right? You see now the pattern, but at the time it was happening you didn't see it, correct?
Oh no, no,
Yeah.
no, no. And you don't want to see that. It's not what you're looking for. I mean,
Great point.
you're really not looking for, you don't want to be paranoid. You don't want to doubt what your partner is saying to you. You want to exist in a relationship of trust. And you're expecting that what you're giving is what you're giving. You're expecting some reciprocity.
Mhm.
But you don't know that what's really going on is that you're being strung along. So again, as I look at these texts, on July the 15th, we were texting between ourselves, and she asked me to write three things that I am most grateful for about our relationship. And one of the three things that she said she was most grateful for about our relationship is to share a bed with me every night. I am grateful to share a bed with you every night.
Hmm.
This is less than 2 weeks now before she files for divorce. So this kind of destabilization, this kind of setup, as you said, is so common. I know this now
Mm-hmm.
that I really hope, Dan, that what I'm doing is providing a cautionary tale for people that they can look at. And again, don't become paranoid, but don't be caught off guard.
Right. Right.
Don't be caught off guard. Don't walk around, looking, snooping, and all of that. I'm not prescribing to that. I'm not suggesting that, but I am suggesting that the smartest of us, and this is the other thing that kind of pisses me off, because sometimes I think as men, we we don't want to admit that we were set up. We don't want to admit that we were taken off guard because we'll be ridiculed. Because we can't say I hurt because we'll be ridiculed. We can't say I was fooled because we'll be ridiculed. But everybody, I don't know if you remember the old R&B song, Everybody Plays the Fool back in the 70s.
Oh, I remember that song. Oh, yeah.
Everybody plays the fool. Anybody can get got, as a friend of mine says. Anybody. And when you are in a relationship like the one that I was in, you're always looking for the best. So I'll reference these text threads again
Mm-hmm.
later, but at some point, um, I think it was the 29th of July. I went to go to bed after we'd had a couple of arguments, and I'm Dan, I'm not one of those guys who argues to the point of throwing things. I've never been that guy. I ain't gonna never be that guy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when things get a little too tough for me because of what I've seen as a child, I'll step away. I'll go sleep in another room. I'll leave the house if I have to,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not going to go down a path that reminds me of what I saw in my parents. And I remember sleeping in one of our other rooms for about 2 nights and then deciding, you know what, I want to sleep in the bed tonight. So I go to sleep in the bed on July 29th, 2021. And she tells me to get out of the room. And I'm like, nah, I'm not sleeping on the couch or in another room tonight. I'm sleeping in my bed.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, get out of here before I call the police. I need to say this, and I think that
Wow.
while the false allegation is the false allegation, and that it can be, I think it can be made more difficult depending on the circumstances. My wife is a white woman, and anybody who knows the history of Black men and white women, in this country in particular, knows how difficult that scenario can be.
Mm-hmm.
And so while it's a problem no matter how you look at it, it is more of a problem when your white wife looks at you and says, "I'm going to call the police," and I'm flabbergasted. I'm like, "What,
Yeah, this came out of nowhere to you, right?
man?"
You had a
It came out of
fight.
nowhere, Dan.
You kind of making up, so to speak, your intention to make up,
That's
and
that's correct.
boom,
That's
and
correct. That's correct. So what she did was, in that moment, she grabbed her phone and she started calling her mother.
hmm,
And I grabbed my phone and I called a friend of ours, a mutual friend of ours. Her mother didn't answer, but my friend answered. And I told my friend, I said, you got to listen to this. I don't know what's going on. Now, I want you to remember that about 2 weeks earlier, she had been sending me these articles about menopause and whether or not you'd survive menopause. And I had been reading articles about premenstrual dysphoric disorder. And I'm thinking, okay, here we go. So I pass my I get my friend on the phone and I said, you got to hear this. I don't know what's going on here. And I said, I don't know what's wrong with it. I don't want to say her name. I said, I don't know what's wrong with it, but you got to hear this. And my wife snatches my phone out of my hand and yells to my friend, I told Ulysses to get out of this room. And if he doesn't get out of this room, I'm going to call the police on him. And my friend said, why would you call the police on him? And she said, because the other night he got into bed, pulled my hair, and tried to choke me. I said, what?
Mm.
She said, you did. You got into the bed. She said, you may not remember. I had my friend write a letter to the court regarding this. She said, you may not remember because your back was to me. I'm thinking, what kind of configuration,
I
contortionist
was
kind
just
of
gonna say to you, how is that possible?
it's
I'm
just
just trying to picture it. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah, man. So my friend said to me, she calls me Butch. She says, Butch, she doesn't sound well. I want you to leave the room. And that's exactly what I did. I left the room. My older daughter was living with us at the time, and I called her and I told her what was going on. And then I wrote an email to about 10 or 12 of our mutual friends. It was almost midnight. And I wrote to them and said, I have no idea what's going on, but if anybody, any of you is nearby, I'd appreciate it if you come by. I need you all to know what's going on. These are some of her friends. These are some of my friends. These are people who know us and have known us. One of my friends drove by, didn't get out the car, just drove by. I told him everything was okay, and he kept going. I was blown away by this choking and pulling hair. I'm like, what in the world is that? So the next day, which was the 30th, my wife got up and left.
Left the
She got up and
house.
left the house.
Okay. Okay.
Left the house and said that she was going to go spend some time with her mom or a friend or something like that. Dan, from that point, the 30th of July, she was gone until the police came for me.
So this was about a week before you got the summons that this was all occurring, right? Because I think it was August 4th. You said was the date. Uh,
August the 4th is the date that I was served. Yep.
what do you know, or maybe you don't want to answer, but if you do, what was the date she signed the divorce papers?
The 29th, the day that she
So
made,
the day she made the allegations.
the day she made the
Yeah.
allegation.
And
Yep.
this is
Yep.
very common. So something that I want people to be aware of, because I've talked with divorce attorneys, I've had a few on the podcast, and we've talked about it. Is what you're hearing is very typical, right? It's a planned, to be blunt, attack, right?
Yep.
And these things are designed to occur in the order they're occurring in, pretty much, right? She's meeting with a lawyer for however long it is. People don't understand that to file divorce, it doesn't happen the next day usually. I mean, it can, but majority of the time it takes a few weeks for the attorneys to get the paperwork ready and all that. So this was probably occurring, as you said, in earlier July, right?
Right.
She's doing that. That's part of the manipulation.
Right.
Keep you happy, stringing you along, I think was the term you used, and then boom, it hits you. Now, if I may, at that moment, you kind of already alluded to this, but how are you like feeling, like internally? What's going through your mind? What's going through your heart? What's going through your body? Because I want people to understand that
Which at what point are we talking about?
when
The
you
accusation?
when you got that first accusation, when you went back to the bedroom.
I felt it was surreal. That's the best way to put it. My heart sunk. My concern went up because as I was saying, it was only 2 weeks before that she was sending me these articles about menopause and premenstrual dysphoric disorder and these. I was concerned that she might be having a nervous breakdown.
Okay.
I was really concerned about that, but I was also concerned about whether or not she was having a nervous breakdown. I remember 2 weeks earlier, she was sending me these articles about will your marriage survive menopause? She was sending me articles about premenstrual dysphoric disorder. She was sending me these articles that had me concerned about her mental, psychological, emotional health. But at the same time, I was concerned about if she were to call the police, what was that going to mean? How would I explain that to the police? Would they care about anything that she was talking about? So it was I was in a really mixed up place,
Hmm.
which is why I reached out to friends,
Which
which is why I always tell people I don't care if you're married, don't ever detach from your network.
you were actually very smart to do what you did. Most guys don't. They do the exact opposite. They shut down. Um, they go and just silo themselves off. So one, they're like you said, they're taking themselves out of their network for the support, but also in creating that opportunity to reach out to people, you're showing you're legitimately concerned, which
Yes,
I'm sure, as we'll get into, helps you later on because
yes,
an actual abuser is not going to reach out to friends per se the way you did. They may reach out.
right.
I'm not going to say they wouldn't do that, but um, it would be like she's crazy. She's doing, they would portray it much differently than you are. So, because I've seen those scenarios play out, I've been the one called at times, right? So you're sitting there on the bed or in the room. She's now left, and you're obviously blown away, right? I mean, there's no other way to put it. Um, what was your next step in your mind, like the next couple of days? Because you mentioned surreal, and that's where I want to kind of go with it, Ulysses, is because that's a common thing I hear. Or detached. There's different terminologies, but surreal is it, right? Were you like walking around in a daze for a couple of days, or what was going on? Because I want people to understand the emotion behind this.
Again, man, I really appreciate you bringing that up because sometimes we get into the technical side of this and we forget about the emotional side of it. We think about the legal side, but we don't talk about the emotional side of it. I was really flat.
Hmm.
Inside, I was flat, but I was trying to continue to communicate with people as much as possible, friends and family. I actually made a few videos before, I think 2 days before they finally came and had me put out the house because I wanted some kind of record of what I was going through. We lived on a 3 acre we lived on 3 acres of land. We had goats, we had chickens, we had ducks, we had dogs. We were putting a farm together for the most part.
Hmm.
And so there was plenty of work to be done. And this is still coming out of COVID where social isolation was a thing. So I was still working remotely from home and I was concerned about her. She just kind of disappeared and I felt really flat. I didn't know what to do and everybody was concerned about her. She didn't reach out to anybody that I knew. When people say this thing of there's two sides to every story, I say no. There are so many sides to a story. It's not
Hmm.
just two. There are so many sides to a story that it's important to keep your friends, family networks, especially in crisis like this, so that other people can contribute to resolution so that they can help to witness what is going on.
Hmm.
And so that to the extent possible, nobody is isolated and truly abused. And so over those 2 days, I was calling people, I was talking with my children. She and I were texting a couple of times, and I got to tell you about these texts. Do you have another question for me?
Go ahead with your text because I think this is important for people to hear. Is you're diving into what I want men primarily, but women who go through this too, right? Because it does happen the other
Right.
way too. I want
Yes.
people
Yeah.
to understand that this is something that when it happens, you have to be prepared ahead of time. In a sense, you were
Right.
because you handled it better than most. Most people, to be blunt, go to pieces. They don't know what's happened.
Right.
They isolate themselves, which is the worst thing you can do. You're really educating people right now, Ulysses, and that's why I want to kind of stay on the point. So go ahead with the text.
Yeah. So she and I were texting one another, and one of the things that I believe set her off in this direction toward the divorce. It's one of the things was that when we moved into our home during COVID, we moved into our home during COVID, June 2020, and we ran into all kinds of difficulties because anybody who remembers COVID remembers restrictions.
Hmm.
If you were buying real estate during COVID, you couldn't get an appraiser in your house. Real estate agents in some places were not allowed to actually go into houses. There were so many restrictions. People would have to recall that many state agencies were shutting down. It was tough to get anything moved from an administrative standpoint. One of the things that we had to concede on in the last 2 days, 2 to 3 days before we moved into the house, was that my name would have to come off of the deed until after closing because I had a $2,000 outstanding debt to the state of Pennsylvania.
Hmm.
$2,000. I said, I can pay that. Well, the problem was that the offices weren't open. And the problem was that if I waited until they opened, that we might lose this house that we wanted. So I conceded and I took my name off of the sale agreement. My wife never put my name back on.
I was just about to ask you, did your name ever go back on? Because I had a feeling you were gonna say no.
Nope, she never put my name back on, Dan, and that became a point of contention for a while. Now, let me say this also. I think many of us have forgotten how mind-boggling the COVID pandemic thing was and how all of us were forced into a whole nother way of living. And one of the last things on my mind, having children, having a grandchild, having to work, one of the last things on my mind was whether or not my wife had actually put my name on the deed. It was one of the last things on my mind until we started to come out of it, until we started to things began to open up
Hmm.
and we started to have these conversations again. It was just one of the last things on my mind because everybody around me was sick and in therapy, and it was crazy.
Yeah, there's a
People,
lot going on in the world at the time, so it makes total sense that you wouldn't really think about it. And honestly, at that point, as you were mentioning, offices are closed. It would have been very difficult to do it. So, makes
yeah,
total
yeah,
sense.
yeah. And I'm, I think when I think in hindsight and I go, I should have done this, I should have done that. I did exactly what I was supposed to do
Hmm.
because my family needed me to make a decision so that we were not left out of this place that we were trying to get under these circumstances. I did the right thing and I was deceived. I was betrayed. So fast forward a year to the place where I'm saying to her, "Hey, we still don't have this paperwork handled. Everything is open. There's no reason why we can't get this done." I'm looking at these texts. We're on the 22nd of July, 2021. We've been in this house for a year now. And I'm writing and I'm saying, you need to get this done. That's July 22nd. A week later, she filed for divorce.
Do you think that might have been the impetus for her to do it?
No question about it.
Okay.
Hey, I'm going to tell you at some point that in uh, June 2022, she and I met face to face and we're having some conversations. And she was saying she was not sure that she wanted to get a divorce. And Dan, she looked me in my face and she said to me, "I'm sorry, it was my greed that kept me from putting your name on the paperwork."
Wow.
She looked, Dan, as I'm looking at you,
Hmm.
she looked me in my face and she said it was my greed that kept me from doing what I agreed to do. I got greedy.
Do you think,
Now,
let me ask you if I can interrupt you for 1 second. Do you think, because this is typical, that maybe her lawyer had instilled that greed in her? Or was it a case of, because it sounds like this may have been planned out a year in advance almost, right? With the house and all
possibly,
that. But there's not every divorce lawyer is bad, but there's enough bad ones out there that will do exactly what you're talking about. they'll pump up the emotions, create that greed, and then trigger things like this. And it sounds like she's got some remorse on that. Do you think it was the lawyer driving it, or do you think otherwise? If you care to share.
I do care to share because I think that, again, as a cautionary tale, I want to share as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
My concern with sounding like I would be blaming the attorney is that that's my wife. That's my partner.
Mm-hmm.
That is the person that I put my trust in. This to triangulate this and put the lawyer into the conversation excuses my wife of accountability. And I can't do that.
Thank you, my friend, for saying that.
I can't do that. I
Thank
can't
you.
I can't put this on the lawyer because if the lawyer told her to hire a
Thank
hitman
you. Yeah.
and she agreed to that, that's her decision. I will not blame the attorney for the agreement that she betrayed between me and her because he's got no place in that.
Thank you so much for saying that. That is something I've said for years is the attorneys are going to do what they do. And in some ways, to be honest with you, it's their job to do it that way. It's ultimately on the petitioner, the person signing the paperwork, to make that decision. The lawyer's not going to
Right.
do it without permission. And they
Right.
have to be held accountable. And they need to
Absolutely.
hold themselves accountable. Thank you so much for saying that. That's something rarely do people acknowledge, I have to say.
And it's hard to do that, Dan, because it's hard and it's necessary. And in the weirdest way possible, I feel like I am one of the perfect targets for this thing because I feel like I have the right tools to address it. I feel
Mhm,
like I can contribute to this conversation.
mhm,
And that means for me, acknowledging my thoughts, my contributions, it means me looking at things as critically as possible, including my behavior. I did not deserve what she did. But if people are going through something like this, I'm asking, and I'm talking to men right now, if you're going through something like this, hold your space as strong and compassionately as possible, be critical, and don't give up more than you need to give up in terms of negotiation because you may be giving up the house,
mhm.
literally speaking,
You'd be giving up a lot more than in some cases access to children and all that. It's one of
and
the
your
things,
reputation.
and your reputation. One of the things I when I'm coaching with guys is to say, let's step back from the emotion. You
Yes.
almost have to become a robot, uh,
Yep.
and become ultra analytical. Right. All right. If I do A, B, C, D are going to happen. If I don't do A, X, Y, Z are going to happen. Really, I tell people write it down. I mean, if you need therapists to help you, if you need an accountant to help you, things that people don't realize when they're going through these things. And I want to get into this in a minute, but first thing to do is contact a lawyer. And the second thing is, after your lawyer, you need to start looking for other professionals. It may be a therapist, it may be an
Right.
accountant, CPA, something like that,
Right.
because you are in for a fight for your life. In
You
some
are.
cases, literally, because you could end up in jail,
Yes, you
or
can.
prison. So uh, I want to kind of get into now. So you've been, well, not you served the paperwork that morning, and then I
Mhm.
think you said it was the state trooper showed up.
State troopers. Yes.
Let's kind of go there right now. So, because this is the passionate part about your video, because you had them on video. And I'm going to say up front, I thought the police, I've been through police trainings, I know what they're trained at. I'm going to give them credit up front as you're
Me
talking
too.
about this, because I
Me
thought
too.
they handled it very professionally. And not to, I'm defending them, but I don't want to defend them too strong, but they're doing their job. And I will
Absolutely.
tell you with absolute certainty, having talked with thousands of cops and having police officers in my family, the number one thing they hate doing is
Is
exactly
this?
what was being done with you. Because they know
Yep.
99% of the time it's bullshit. I said the
That's right.
word.
That's right. That's right.
So they show up at your house. Can you kind of talk about what happened?
After I was served with the divorce papers, I called a friend. Man, I was calling friends and family so much. um, that I don't know that I don't have something wrong with one of my ears from the amount of, radiation.
Forget cauliflower ear, you got phone ear, right?
I got phone ear, man. But after I was served the divorce documents, I went into our library, which sits on a particular side of the street where I can see traffic. And I saw a state trooper kind of going back and forth really slowly. And they were close enough to the property where I could see them looking in our direction. And they were going back and forth. And I said to my friend, hey man, I think the state troopers are looking for me. So they double back and I follow them around through the window and I see them begin to come up the driveway. I hang up on my friend and I immediately start to record. And they were young enough to be my sons.
Mm-hmm.
They should have never been put in the position to do that. And this is one of the things that gets me about this situation is we're abusing resources for selfish gain.
Mm-hmm.
And so they should have never been put in that position. So when they pull into our driveway, they actually went to our neighbors and then they backed up and I walked out and I recorded from the time I pushed the screen door open. And I approached them and I asked them, are you looking for me? I told her my name, as people could see in one of the videos that I did. And I said, I'm recording this bullshit. I said, because this is bullshit. And the guy said, that's fine. That's fine. And I asked them to introduce themselves. I am not a wild maniac jumping. I'm a military guy, Dan. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I have respect for the uniform most of the time.
And I will say on the video, if you haven't watched it yet, pause now, go watch it, come back. It's to be in the show notes because what he's saying is absolutely true. You were nothing but professional with them and vice versa.
Again, the guys were young enough. I've got a 34-year-old. I don't believe either of these guys was
I
34.
don't think they were either, remembering the video, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So at one point, even in the video, I asked the one young man to take his glasses off, and people misread why I did that as if I was busting his balls. And I'm like, no, I want to be able to identify who it is that came onto my property. I don't know where this is going. I want to know who you are, what you look like. If somebody asks me what color was his eyes, I'm gonna be able to tell you what color his eyes was. And so we talked a lot. People don't see some of the conversations that we had. I had my dogs. We talked about my dogs. It was friendly for the most part. I was destroyed on the inside though, Dan. I was
Mm-hmm.
so hurt, man. I was so hurt that when he handed me that piece of paper and said, she's serving you with a protection from abuse. I didn't know what a protection from abuse was.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know. I'd heard the term restraining order. That was that was like a 70s thing growing up. I'd heard people getting restraining orders, but I didn't know what a protection from abuse was.
Right.
I didn't know what the implications were. I didn't know what the consequences would be. And so I'm asking a lot of questions that for some people might sound dumb, but if you're not a criminal, if you've never been approached this way, you don't know what the hell people are talking about.
Yeah,
But
it's a legal term that a lawyer would know what it is. I know what it is
sure,
because I've worked in the field. But
right,
yeah, the average person's TROs, another one you'll hear, temporary order of protection, TROPs. They called it, what was it in your
right.
case, protection from abuse or whatever.
Protection from abuse,
There's all
right,
different
right.
variations on it, but essentially, basically, it's saying in the court's eyes, you've committed an offense and they're serving you with paperwork to remove you from the situation. In your case, it was your house.
That's correct. And I think the thing that hurt me before he handed me the paper, the thing that hurt me most is when he handed me the piece of paper and I started to flip through it and I saw her handwriting. And I'm thinking, wow, she sat down someplace and she started writing this stuff and none of this is true. And as I looked at this paperwork on August the 4th, 2021, her storyline on this paperwork was that I got into the bed on the 24th of July. She was very, very specific. I got into the bed on the 24th of July, pulled her hair, and tried to choke her.
Mm-hmm.
This is what she wrote on the paper. Now, mind you, the story I told earlier about her telling me with my friend on the phone was the 29th. So on the 29th, she screams at me in the bedroom that I tried to choke her and pull her hair. When she files the PFA, she writes that it happened on the 24th, but she doesn't file the PFA until August the 4th. That's almost 2 weeks from the time that this happened. So I told a friend of mine, I said, I think the reason why she didn't file it actually sooner is because we had visitors from out of town on the 24th.
Could be, yeah.
We had friends, a couple of friends of mine from Chicago came to visit. They were with us from the 23rd until the 26th. And so I said, I think if you were not here, she probably would have done this sooner. But it's so clear to me that it's premeditated. It's
Yeah.
so clear.
Well, it could be. I mean, I'm going to make some suppositions here, if I may, because I want to kind of set the context for the listeners on how these are issued. So let's use the 24th of the quote unquote date of event. If she then goes to her lawyer at that point, the lawyer is going to try and suss out what's happened and how they can use it.
Yep.
They're going to then file the paperwork. As you said, they take her statement. It could have been a paralegal taking it. It could have been they just had her write it. It's different scenarios. And then the attorney gathers that. And then they go before a judge to
Right.
ex parte. So that means Ulysses has no idea this is happening. You don't need to be there in these courts. All she's got to do is go in with an allegation. I've talked about it many times on this podcast. It's the 5 magic words. I am afraid of him. It's all you
There
need.
you go. Yep.
In your case, she actually went further than that. So that's all that's needed, and that order is issued. You did not know it was issued until they served you. You had no opportunity to defend yourself at that point, and the police show up. And take a moment, just if you're listening, step back and think about that. You've been through this surreal experience, right? She's out the door at this point. You've had this misunderstanding. I'm trying to be polite here. Misunderstanding. You're talking with friends, but you really don't know what's going on. I mean,
Right.
you're kind of guessing your way through it. And then state police show up or a sheriff shows up. Put yourself in that situation for a moment. Put yourself in Ulysses' shoes at this point. Like you said, you didn't know what was going on, and that's what I hear over and over again, and it comes out of left field. You have no idea this is all being done. So now the police are there, and I remember watching your video. The one cop, he was to the left. Now they were next to each other. The one to the left to me, I was watching his face while you guys were all talking, and I'm guessing on my part, I'm not speaking for him, but watching his face and his body language, he knew it was a complete BS order. He knew. I
He did
could
not want
tell.
to do it,
I could
Dan.
tell. I could tell, Ulysses.
He did not want to do it. And I know somewhere that guy is out there and has seen these videos of him and like,
And he
hey
can't
man,
say
I'm
anything.
sorry.
Yeah, he can't say anything.
He can't say anything.
No.
I know I could tell by the way he was talking
Mm-hmm.
that he wasn't feeling it. And again, we're walking around my house for around 20 minutes because I had to collect clothes, I had to get the dogs in, I had to secure the house as best I could. And we're having different types of conversations. At one point, I have to hand over my gun. I hand over the gun. Um, it was it was a bad. I felt like all three of us were being punished in a way, and of course, I got the worst of it. But I'm thinking to myself, what a waste of these guys' time. What a waste of our resources.
Mm-hmm.
And to put me and the two of them in a situation where they don't know who they're showing up to see, they don't know anything about me.
Right.
And I don't know anything about them. And one wrong or misunderstood word could lead to something, but I'm glad I am who I am. I'm glad they are who they were. And I'm glad we were able just to get in and out without incident because the real stuff was still to come.
Mm-hmm. Well,
And
yeah, I want to get to that in a moment, but I kind of want to make a couple of points that are important for anyone that goes through this. Because when I made my video off of yours, I had a couple of guys saying, "Oh, there's no way they're going to evict me from my house." Yeah, they are.
yes, they
Okay,
are.
you aren't going to win.
Yeah.
All right, they have SWAT, they have you name it. You're going out of that house. You may go out in a body bag if you go too far, and I want to give you some credit because the way you handled it, in my opinion, is the textbook example of how to handle it. One, you did record, and you should record. And that's not to put the blame on the cops.
Right.
You're simply protecting yourself,
That's
right?
correct.
And to be blunt, you're protecting them as well, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
And you handled it masterfully. I have to say that. And I hope people go watch the video for no other reason than that, because I am aware of situations where guys put up the fight. It did not end well. And as I said, because I had guys chirping at me going, oh, he should have fought them and all this other stuff. And I'm like, guys, two things are going to happen. Like I said, you're going to get taken out one way or the other, one. And two, you just confirmed that that order was valid. You
Absolutely.
showed yourself as an angry man. And
Yep.
I'm going to go there. In your case, for those that aren't watching and that are listening, you are black. That has to come into play here. You have to,
Absolutely.
we have to address that, right?
Yes.
To be blunt, it would be different if it was me versus you. We know that,
Right.
okay?
Right.
And that's,
Right.
I'm not blaming the police. I'm not doing any of that, but that is the reality we need to, it's the world we live in, right?
Yes.
Um, so the way you handled it was masterful, if I may say that. And I'm not saying that because you're sitting in front of me, as you know, on the screen. I'm saying that because I have seen the other side of these, and it did not end well. So kudos to you, and frankly to those police officers also, because it's a no-win situation for everyone involved. So
Yeah.
they give you the time to pack up, and then you're leaving. Did anything else occur after that that you want to share, as far as with the interactions with the police?
No, nothing else. They follow me around. Again, we talked about my dogs. I actually took one of my dogs with me, packed up my stuff, signed the papers, got in the car, and I left. And the drive out of that driveway was, man, I was devastated. You know, when you talk about how I handled it
Mm-hmm.
externally, I'm clear. I've been in some very difficult situations in my life, and I'm clear about what it means to fall apart on the inside and hold it together on the outside,
Mm-hmm.
to be broken down inside, but you got to allow your body to move you to a space of safety. And that's what I wanted. I wanted my body to get to a place of physical, emotional safety where I could think about what happened. I couldn't break down right there.
Mm-hmm.
And I did not know what was going on. I felt so incredibly betrayed. I felt so blindsided. I felt so many things, but none of those things mattered while I was in my interaction with the police. What mattered was a very technical, practical uh, concern.
Mm-hmm.
Get your things, put them in the car, and leave. That's what mattered. And that's what I did.
And it was the best thing you could have done at that point. And then, like you said, as you're driving away, you're dealing with all those emotions. How people handle them is unique to the person, right?
Sure.
For some, it may be, I'm just gonna, me, I would have gone into total robot mode. I would have driven probably for a couple of hours trying to process it. That's what would have
Yeah.
been for me. If
Yeah.
someone pulled off to the side of the road, broke down, so be it, right? There's nothing
Right.
wrong with that. Each of us is unique as an individual. The key point being, and you kind of said this, do what you need to do for yourself to get to
Mm-hmm.
that point of safety,
Mm-hmm.
whether
Mm-hmm.
it's physically, emotionally, mentally, all of that. That's the most important thing you need to do at that point. Then you need to start taking action. But and that's where I want to go with you now. So you've gotten out of the situation, you've gone somewhere. What was your next steps?
I started calling attorneys that I knew. And it's always good to have some attorneys in your network for a variety of reasons. You should have some attorneys in your network. So I called some attorneys, and one of them said to me, said, this is standard procedure. This is what they do to get somebody out of the house.
It's called a
Wow,
silver bullet.
called the silver bullet.
Yep.
She didn't use that term. It took some time for me, Dan, to come to that. I didn't come to the understanding of the name or the term. It took me a while to get there, but she was very clear that this is what they do when they are starting to push for something else. And she said, be clear, it's illegal. It's illegal and it's hard to prove
Hmm.
that it becomes the he said, she said thing. I wound up defending myself in court.
So
So
you went pro se. You didn't
yes, I did.
you didn't
I
have
sure did.
wow. Because normally I tell guys don't do that. Do share.
And so I went and saw a couple of attorneys, and one of them that I really trusted, she was not able to make it on the date. The date
Okay.
wound up being I was put out on a Wednesday, and the court date was the 12th of August. So I was out of the house for a week, and I went to an attorney and I said, I didn't do anything. I can prove that I didn't do anything. And she said, I can't be there with you, but if you think you can go in, let me see what you have. I showed her all of the text messages. I showed her all of this stuff that I had. And she said, she said, Butch, another person who calls me Butch, she says, I know you. I think you can go in there and do it. If you feel like you got to do it and you can't afford to wait for me, then go ahead and do it. So I went in and I did it. When I got into court, of course, I don't know anything about telling somebody, objection, Your Honor,
Hmm.
or, I don't know any of that stuff. And so the lawyer was just rambling on and on and on. But what really got me was my wife's decision to make me look horrible. She had decided that she was going to talk about our sex lives in court, that she was going to make everything that we've ever done absolutely horrible. And I tell people it reminded me of watching Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. I don't know if you remember that
I
movie.
read the book and the movie. Yep.
Movie and a book when I was in high school,
Yep.
Dan. I looked down at her and I remembered Mayella Ewell. For those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, and I was Tom Robinson, and I'm looking down there going, I cannot believe you're doing this. I cannot believe you are lying like this. And the judge read right through it. I was so happy.
I was going to ask you. So you walk in this courtroom, and I've shared my story, which is what first time I walked into family court, and it was very eerily similar to your situation. I was by myself and all that. But you go in there and you start like I've always talked about in my case, I thought it was going to be like Law and Order, LA Law. You go in, you present your evidence, she presents hers. It's all very nice and wrapped up in a bow, and then the judge is going to decide. No, it ain't nothing like that. Okay,
No,
it's war. Okay,
it is war.
and there is no rules. There are supposed to be rules, but there's no rules. Okay, and then so one of the things that I've seen, because I've gone in with guys on these cases, is again, it's he said, she said, it's preponderance of the evidence. It's not proven beyond any reasonable doubt. That does not
That's
exist
correct.
in these courts.
No,
It is he said, she said, whoever the judge believes more is going to quote unquote win, because I don't think anybody wins in these situations. So you're standing there. The opposing attorneys presenting their evidence, saying, I can even imagine what they say because I've seen what they do. And this is one of the reasons, by the way, is just quick side note, why I tell guys you should have an attorney with you, because you don't know when to object. Even if you
no, you
know,
don't.
I know the law. I mean, I studied the law for family court. I'm
Right,
well versed on it, but as far as knowing when to object, mm-mm. Um, and sometimes you make mistakes letting things in that shouldn't be and all that. But
right,
anyway,
right.
so as you're standing there going through this experience, and you said the judge read through it, can you kind of talk about that's what I wanted to kind of get to. How was the judge reacting listening to this? I don't know if it was a man or woman.
It was a woman.
It was and that was to your advantage, my friend.
I think so.
The men, Mm-mm. The women know. They really do. How was she like addressing the opposing attorney? Was she inquisitive on what they were saying? Because I've heard different things, I've seen different things. In your particular case, how was the judge acting?
She was openly not believing what my wife was saying, just openly. I mean, you could just see it in her face. At one point, my wife said, when she said the whole thing about my husband came up from behind me and tried to pull my hair and choke me. And the judge said, well, can you demonstrate what that looks like? And like kind of like what you said, if he's got his back turned to you, can you demonstrate what that looks like? And it was comical, Dan. It's like, and then, but you know what her final answer was? She says, well, my husband's a martial artist. He knows how to do things with his hands. And I'm like, oh my God.
I'm sorry to
I'm
laugh,
sorry to
but
laugh, but hey man, it's funny now. I have to tell you that, and I can laugh at this now
yeah.
is amazing because I cried like a baby there in court. I need to say that because
How could
I
you
went
not?
in.
How I mean, honestly, how could you not?
I Dan, I thought that she was struggling, man. I really kept thinking to myself, I am not going to attack her because she's struggling. At one point through my I guess cross examination of her as a witness, I asked her, "Have you ever struggled with PMDD, premenstrual dysphoric disorder?" And the her judge objected, I believe, and
Her attorney, you mean?
her attorney, I'm sorry, her
Yeah.
attorney objected. And then the judge said, no, 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 go ahead. And I said, have you ever struggled with PMDD? And then her attorney called for, he wanted to approach. And then the judge said to both of us, approach. We wound up standing in front of the judge for 30 to 45 minutes talking about premenstrual dysphoric disorder. Finally, the judge said, unfortunately, Mr. Slaughter, you're not a therapist or something like that. I said, well, here are the texts that show that this was a concern for us. In the end, Dan, the judge found my wife's uh, claims to be unfounded, which is all that I don't like that term at all because if they're founded, you're in trouble. If they're unfounded, everybody just goes home. It was almost like, well, you gave it a shot to make them look bad, but it didn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't unwind the clock that's happened
It
for the last.
no, it doesn't. It does not punish the person who is making a false allegation, and it comes off as my bad, as people like to say. No, I've been out of my house for 7 days. So anyway, it was unfounded, but a friend of mine told me, no matter what, do not go back into the house with her. Under no circumstances should you go back in the house with her.
You had a very smart friend, my friend.
Now, it was unfounded, but I was still removed from the house for 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
It was unfounded. I was removed from the house for 6 months, which gave them an opportunity to move toward exclusive possession of the property. So when you talk about this thing as well orchestrated, designed, they know the steps that they're going to take. They know the room that they need. They know the answers that they need well ahead
Mm-hmm.
of the first accusation of you choked me, you tried to pull my hair. They figured all of this stuff out. And by the time you get in front of a judge, they're usually like two steps ahead of you. And you are defending yourself. I want to just say this because I've been saying this a lot. And men need to, I think, understand this that these situations are designed to discredit you, to take you in the court and discredit you, to make you look bad to yourself, to the court, to your friends, your family, your work, your coworkers. I've known men, and I know you do too, who have actually been served on the job.
Oh, many times. That's very. It's probably. I honestly think that's more common than serving at the house because, and I have spoken with police officers about it. They're more comfortable doing it there because there's less risk to them. Now, some have disagreed with that, by the way, but They just feel if it's at the job, like you mentioned, you had a weapon at your house, right? That's a legitimate concern for a police officer, as opposed to if you're on the job, odds of you carrying a weapon are much lower. So that they
Right.
do look at it that way. But can I ask a quick question? Was the judge who you saw to defend yourself, was it the same one that issued the order?
No.
The, okay. That's, you hear it both ways, right? So again, I want to kind of take a step back here and realize that another judge issued this order ex parte. You never had a chance to defend yourself. And then
Right.
you go in and you do successfully, and I might add, defend yourself, right? But this is the, I don't like to use the term, but this is the quote unquote beauty of the silver bullet because it still worked. It got you out of the house. They still had the material possession of the house. And in your case, you didn't have children, right? But had there been an issue of custody at that time, she would have been awarded the children and custody automatically. So, again, for those listening, think about that. He's kicked out of his house. If there had been children living there, custody would have been given to her. So, as you said earlier, it was 6 months later before you could adjudicate out to so where you could get back to the house. It's given possession is 9/10 of the law of both the house and the children and everything that goes with them. That's the beauty of the silver bullet because even though you successfully defended yourself, you still lost. And that's a
Yep.
point I want people to understand is that there is no winning there. Not for guys
And I
especially.
no, I don't see the win either. I think that it is designed to create momentum for the win as they see it. They want you out of the house. They want you to, I was saying, they want you to be discredited. They want to destabilize you because destabilizing you from your home means that you've got to create an entirely different living situation for yourself, which means that money has to go someplace else. You got to find someplace else to
Mm-hmm.
live. You need to find other resources. So now you got to find someplace else to live, and you also got to have enough money to defend yourself.
Right.
So they want to begin to drain your resources. And it's almost like making you say uncle. They want to put you in a situation where you are working with as little as possible. And when it comes time to making agreements and negotiating, that your power is weakened. And so the discrediting, the destabilization, I say the disorientation because for me, I was disoriented. I kept thinking, what is wrong with her? For a while, I kept thinking, what's wrong with her? Is she okay? And there was nothing wrong with her. She had made up her mind that she was going to attack me. That's all there really was to it. And I was being gaslit
Mm-hmm.
into believing that something else was wrong. So then I know men, and I think I fell there too for a while, men who are suffering with depression as a result of this stuff. It's designed to depress you.
It's designed to, well, everything you said is true, right? It's, think about it in terms of a military operation. If you can
Yep.
demoralize your enemy, if you can get them to expend resources that would then take away from their ability to defend themselves, all of that comes into play. This is not some random thing that happens. This is a well orchestrated, well designed, well thought out attack. And that's
Yes.
exactly what it is. It's an attack.
Yes. Yep.
And even though it, and you mentioned this earlier, it is illegal. If an attorney files paperwork knowing that it's false, they can get in a lot of trouble. The problem is proving that they knew it because all they got to say is, well, that's what the client told me. I have to defend them to the best of my ability. I've had attorneys tell me proving that another attorney did it is virtually impossible. It's
Mm-hmm.
has it happened? Yes, there's been instances, but you got a better chance of winning the lottery. You know, as we're filming this, the lottery is about $1 billion tonight. I think you got a better chance of winning that than you have of proving that an attorney knowingly and willfully did that. The only way you can do it is if you go through their court cases and can show an established pattern. As I'm actually working with someone on an attorney that they've established over 60% of the cases she files, she uses the silver bullet. That the odds of that is ridiculous. So you've now gone through. I kind of want to keep the story going here. So you've gone through. You've won your appeal. I'll call it. You're going through the divorce at this process at this time. I want to again stay on the emotion also, but talk a little bit about the proceedings as they went, but also as you're feeling as you're moving along. At any point, did you get angry? Any of that?
Very. I got very angry because I felt like I had been suckered. I felt like my wife had absolutely taken advantage of my trust. I felt like she not only betrayed me, but she betrayed our friends, she betrayed our family, she betrayed the community that we served.
She betrayed your children, Ulysses. Let me be blunt on that, because
Yes, absolutely. She betrayed my children because we were a blended family
mm-hmm,
and we bought this property with the intent of passing it down to our children. And we said we were working on doing something very different together.
mm-hmm,
We, as I mentioned in another video, we got married on Dr. King's birthday. We were always doing MLK Day events. We had this groove, I thought,
mm-hmm.
of the way that we were going to love one another and contribute to society. And where we lived, Dan, a lot of people they knew us. They knew of what they would refer to as this power couple that was out in the world doing things and making things happen. She was part of the work that I did with the move bombing,
Mm-hmm.
and this total betrayal of our children first and foremost is something that is still left unresolved. I need to mention this on May 13th, 2021, which was, I'm sorry, May 13th, 2022, which was 2 years after I did the move bombing apology. I filed a lawsuit against her for fraud. And that lawsuit is pending.
Mm-hmm.
The the judge who is going to um, preside over that case wanted the divorce to come to an end, wanted the decree to be issued before he looked at that because he wanted to look at how equitable distribution was handled, how the house was handled, how all those matters were handled before he took on the issue of fraud.
Mm-hmm.
So I just don't want to forget that I do have a lawsuit pending against her.
So the divorce is finalized. How, if you don't mind sharing, you don't have to go too detailed into it, but how did that whole process go? And how did it end up working out for you? So does she have the house? Is that
Right now, she lives in the house. I've been out of the house now for 2 years. And I think I mentioned earlier, it was back in June 2022. Yeah, June 2022, where the two of us got together. We got together on maybe three occasions. And by the time I got with her, I had actually started reading stuff, Dan, about narcissism. I started reading stuff about psychopaths and sociopaths. I had all these conversations with people. And I remember sitting with her at one time, just kind of looking at her and listening to her and feeling like this was not somebody that I knew. This was somebody that just, this was like a total stranger to me. And here she was talking to me about pulling the divorce off the table, acknowledging that she had lied about the deed and the mortgage of sale. And I just kept looking at this woman thinking, there is something wrong with you. There's something really wrong with you. And my heart really sunk. I know people can say whatever they want, but if you care about someone, whether it be a child, a wife, a husband, whoever, if you care about someone, you care about them.
mm-hmm.
And when you begin to see them collapse in some kind of way, you can get angry with them. And they probably deserve the anger. But it's almost like looking at my father and thinking, you really messed up
Mm-hmm.
and you're still my father. And I would look at her and I'd be going, wow, you really messed up. And you're still right now my wife. And I got to figure out how I can deal with you and remain true to the things that I believe in. I got to figure out how I can look at you and deal with you with some compassion as you continue to tell these lies. I got to figure out how I can look at you and protect myself and honor my children and honor my friends and family and my community and still deal with you with some kind of justice in mind because you have to be punished. You cannot do these things to all of these people and just walk away like nothing happened. I
Hmm.
can't allow that to happen.
That's Ulysses, you're making up a very, very good point right there. Is even though you were the direct victim here, right? You weren't the only one, right? It
Right.
affected your friends, your family. Um, it affected your children most of all. And I always say to people that are ever contemplating using this, if the attorney's pushing you towards, because I've had people come to me, oh, my attorney says I should do it, and I'm like, one, fire that attorney right now, right?
Right.
Because they're not putting your children first. And
Right.
even if your children are adult, it's irrelevant. They're still getting hurt because the thing that people don't realize is, and I want you to speak on this a little bit more than I probably far better than I can, but um, down the road, your children are going to get married. You're going to have to see her, and vice versa. Your children are in a bind in that point. My children have gone through hell because my first wife just, like, for example, I shared not too long ago, my oldest daughter got married. My first wife did everything she could to prevent me from being there. She put my daughter through hell for that. Where's the benefit to that? And as you're seeing her and you're talking about that, here's my takeaway from what you just said with that is you actually loved her, because
Oh, absolutely.
if you didn't love her, you could walk away. I'm done, right? It speaks to you as a husband, a man, all of that, right? But how, like, as you're moving forward, how do you think you are going to feel like seeing her at, say, a wedding or something like that? And more importantly, how do you think your children are going to feel? Because I want people to hear that.
Well, again, we don't share children.
Okay, so you're not going to, so even though you have stepchildren, I
Yes,
hate that term, by the way.
I do too.
Uh, for example, I have a quote unquote stepson, but I consider him mine. Right? He is no different a son to me than my biological ones. So, I would want to be at his wedding or his events, even though I'm not married to his mother anymore. So, even that, I get what you're saying, but I still think it gets affected.
It does, Dan. I think that we are foolish to think that this kind of behavior does not harm everybody and that it's been 2 years, but you've still got a festering wound underneath a very raggedy bandage.
Mm-hmm.
And people don't forget these kinds of things. You have harmed people. When people go through divorces, and this is going back to this thing about there are two sides to every story. No, there are multiple sides. So many of our friends have reached out to her and attempted to talk to her, and she's just ignored them.
Hmm.
And so they have feelings regarding this as well. They feel betrayed. They're like, wait a minute, if he did something to you, if he really did something to you, you should be able to say something to us about what happened. You should know that we would be with you if something actually happened. But why are you ignoring us? We're the people who accepted you into our families, into our communities, into our organizations. We accepted you. So why are you doing this to us
Mm-hmm.
if he did this? So the harm is comprehensive. It's above and beyond our marriage, and it needs to be resolved. And I am not going to stop what I'm doing at this point until this is fully exposed and until I feel like I have paid a debt, because I really feel like I owe a debt to my children. to my friends, my family. I feel like I set us up, and I might be overdoing this, but this is just how I feel. I feel like I gave someone an opportunity to betray us through a relationship with me, and I don't like it. I don't like feeling like I allowed somebody into our space. And this person, a friend of mine, said if she just kind of threw a Molotov cocktail at us. She got in the car, threw the Molotov cocktail, and drove off and didn't care.
Hmm.
We thought she cared.
You know, what you're expressing right now, Ulysses, I've heard many times before. And men in particular that go through this go down one of two paths. The least common one is what you're doing. You speak about it, you try and educate others, you try and take action. The more common path is these men turn to alcohol, they turn to drugs, they unalive themselves. Well, this will be on YouTube and Spotify. They commit suicide. You can't say you got to say unalive on TikTok and some other places. But
Is that right?
yeah, yeah, if you say suicide, they'll take you down. Um, one of the things that people don't realize is you often hear about men's mental health and
Mm-hmm.
committing suicide. One of the biggest factors when they look at it that causes men to do it is divorce. But there's not a lot of research on this, but I would venture to argue that it's situations like yours in particular where a false allegation's gone in and you just feel lost. And what have I done? In your case, you kind of mentioned it. I feel like I let people down. You're able to handle it, and thank God you are, right? But a lot of guys can't, and that's where they reach that point where, unfortunately, they turn to things like alcohol, drugs, or killing themselves. And that's why I'm so passionate about this, is trying to get guys, and I hope they watch this show, to understand there is that other fork in the road, right? Which is hold your head high. Yeah, you're getting beaten down, and you are, but you will come out of it. See, a lot of guys think they're never going to come out of it. You will come out of it. And this is the guys I work with. This is what I coach them. As bad as it is, you will come out of it. And the best way to do that is one, talk about it, share the
Yes.
experience, what you're doing, and if you can, take actions to protect yourself or, like you said, file a lawsuit. That's what we have to do as victims in this, right? I've never been through a false allegation like that, so I shouldn't include myself in that. But it is so important what you're doing, because I will tell you right now, I've had guys reach out to me when your video came out, because guys send me videos all the time. I probably had 30 or 40 guys send me that video.
Is that right?
I would say I had one other one in the spring where I swear to God, I think every guy on the planet sent it to me. But yours, you hit home with that, right? You were striking a chord from guys going, I went through this. And I had hundreds of comments and direct messages and all that. The point being, this is not uncommon. This is
Right.
common, common. And it's important that you do what you do, I do what I do, so that we can help these guys. Um, and I want to kind of go there for a minute and let you talk about what is your goal ultimately with your channel. You're on TikTok. Are you anywhere else also? I want to kind of address that.
I have so much work that I've done in film and be like I said before I wound up in this space, I was doing so many other things that I've never really paid social media that much attention. And it took me a long time, obviously, to put up the video regarding the eviction. And so now I'm doing it because I realize that there are men out there that have ended their lives. Dan, when I heard that, I was shocked, man. I just felt like I fell into a whole nother world
Hmm.
that I was totally unaware of. And I didn't ask to be in this world of false allegations. It kind of sucked me in.
Hmm.
And I feel like I'm the perfect target for this because I feel like I know what to do with it. And I'd like to help those men who have struggled with this to recover. There's a way that they can recover, that there can be light. And I think that they can learn to rebuild themselves. And I've had to rebuild myself. So it is my hope that in part I do have to continue to do the work that pays bills and the work that has to do with you know, my art forms.
Mhm.
But I've already decided that this can be part of my art form, that this expression around false allegations can be part of my art form. And I'm also aware that all it took was one false allegation for my business, my work, my reputation to be compromised. So
Mhm.
I'm trying to figure out how to do these things in a parallel way to teach guys how to protect their asset, the asset of reputation, the assets of relationships, the assets of resources. How can you do that in a parallel way so that you're not taken off guard? And that's what I want to do. I want to help people recover and do these things in a parallel way.
Mhm.
So you're protecting and you are building at the same time.
And that's the key to it, right? It's communicating. It's telling your story. Um, because you kind of alluded to this way back when. We don't want to make ourselves to the point where we're paranoid, checking
Right.
phones, tracking people. That no, that no,
No.
I don't think any good comes from that, unless you have a legitimate reason. There are times it's absolutely appropriate, but
Right.
the majority of the time you don't want to be there. But I always use the term trust but verify. You're going to trust the person, but if your gut's telling you something
Right.
ain't right here,
Right.
then it's okay. Step back, take the emotion out of it. You know, she's like you talked about, she was talking about menopause and all that stuff. Hey, wait a minute. Maybe I got to start paying attention because most guys, in fact, I would argue of the guys I talked to, probably 90 to 95% of them had no idea it was coming. I will give credit where credit's due. Women are masters at hiding what they're doing, right? Men are idiots. I say it. I mean, we we live oblivious. I swear to God, right? And it happened to me, and I say that because when my first wife left me, I went to work. We actually worked in the same building. She said, "I'm calling in sick today." Okay, I'll catch you when I get home. I went to work. I came back. I left at 6:30 in the morning. I got back about 6 at night to an empty house. It was a mattress, a blanket, and a pillow. That was it. She cleaned the house out while I was gone, right? With the help of her parents and other. I had no idea that she was going to do that. We are oblivious. So I always tell guys, keep your eyes and ears open. Doesn't mean you don't trust. Doesn't mean you don't love,
Right.
but be smart about it. And if you start seeing signs, trust your gut because had I trusted mine, and it sounds like if you had trusted yours, things might have gone a little differently. All right, Ulysses, we only have a couple more minutes left. I want to give you a moment to really kind of talk about anything we've missed or any other things that you want, any other points that you want to make.
It goes back to the false allegation for me, Dan. The false allegation of abuse is just that. And I think when men find themselves confronting a false allegation of abuse, they really need to draw up the strength to remember who they are.
Mm-hmm.
They need to remember that they, as you've said a number of times, that you're under attack. And you do have to become very objective, very technical, with as little emotion as possible to deal with this attack. You got to remember who you are. That was one of the things that really carried me forward. I didn't disconnect from my community. I did not isolate from friends and family. They reminded me of who I was.
Mm-hmm.
As much as I cried, as much as I hurt, they kept reminding me of who I was. And so for men in particular who go through this, you got to remember who you are, that you can recover, that you can rebuild. I hear men say things like, I lost everything. And I know what they mean when they say that. My grandmother taught me that there's nothing more important than your peace of mind. And it is in that thinking that is helping me help myself and help others in the recovery process.
Mm-hmm.
Do not forget who you are because whatever it is that you built, you can probably rebuild. You can probably get again, but don't give up on who you know you are. Don't forget. Don't allow somebody to discredit you. And if you know Dan, reach out to Dan.
Mhm.
If you want to get to know me, you can reach out to me. My website, ulyssesbutchslaughter.com. I've had a number of men reach out to me, Dan, and want to know how I did it and how I'm doing. And I'm telling you, I'm doing fantastic. I've had a chance to meet Dan. I've had a chance to meet Alan Donovan. I've had a chance to meet the guy who runs veterans, the Veterans
Bill
Fathers
Corbett.
Group.
Bill Corbett and I are friends. Yeah.
He talked to me about you a couple weeks ago, and I'm like, wow, there's this band of men out there who are very strong and who, in conversation, help me to become stronger and remember who I am. So, men out there, reach out. You want to recover, reach out to men like this, and let's start to rebuild.
Amen. By the way, I may say, I think your grandmother was a genius, if I may add that, because in the end, stuff can be reacquired,
Yep,
houses, whatever goodies you might have had. It's you use the term dignity. I call it self-awareness, or whatever term you want to use. Know you are who you are. You are a valuable human being. You do have worth, because I know a lot of guys feel like, well, I'm not worth anything anymore. Yes, you do. You do. You have worth. May not be to that person that's attacking you, but many others around you. You know, and you need to understand that, because unfortunately, too many guys don't see that, and they lead themselves down paths of literally destruction. And
yeah,
if anyone is at that point, yes, reach out to me, reach out to Ulysses, some of the other names you mentioned. Well, there are a group of us, and we all work together, and we're starting to coalesce more, which is something that's long overdue, where we
it
can
is.
start helping guys, right?
Yep,
Because, and again, I want to stress another point real quick, is this happens to women also in
yes, it
reverse.
does.
There are guys that do this. And I have had guys come to me at times and go, guess what I did? Like, all proud, and I just ripped them to shreds. I was like, what are you doing? You get no support from me. And you never will. And they get, like, well, what do you mean? I just preempted her. No, doesn't make you a better man, right?
No, it doesn't.
But I just want to, as we're closing down, I want to say to you, thank you for sharing your story, Ulysses, because it's tough to share the story. It's tough for me sometimes. It's tough for you. And I appreciate you doing that, because I know I've had guys reach out to me. You've had guys reach out to you about your story. That video and series of videos, really, it wasn't just the one. One went really viral, but there was a series after that. I've watched them all. I want people to go watch those videos. Can you share your TikTok real quick so that we can make sure that they can go watch them?
Yeah, it is. It's UB Slaughter. I believe that's the handle. It's UB Slaughter. I'm still getting to know these things, Dan.
social media,
You
social
know,
media is a whole other animal. I will make sure it's in the show notes so you can go follow him. And you
yeah,
want to follow him. Don't just watch the videos. Follow his account, because I'm sure you'll be updating and sharing other stuff. And really listen to what he says. Go watch that video when the police officers showed up. Watch, as we talked about, their reaction, and understand, because a lot of people like to take it out on the police officers. I don't. Are there exceptions? Are there some that are a-holes? Yes, there are. Okay.
right, right.
But the overwhelming majority of police officers want nothing to do with it. They know to their core that this is not right. And half of them know it's going to happen to them at some point, too.
I
So,
was just about to say that, man. Just like we talked about the lawyers and the judges, it could happen to them too. Nobody wants to do that. So, we can be kind to the police officers.
yes. And again, learn from those videos how to handle it if you get in that situation. Ulysses, again, I want to thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. And I
It's been
want
an
you to
honor.
keep updating that story. I'm sure we'll stay in contact. And again, thank you for sharing your story with us.
Thank you, Dan. We'll talk soon.
All right. All right, everybody. On that note, we're going to go ahead and close down the show. Powerful story, no? So, as you take from this, and listen to this, I want you to really put yourself in Ulysses' position. Understand that what he went through and what he is going through is not rare. It is common. It happens every single day to hundreds, if not thousands of men. and some women. It's not right, right? There's no reason to allow this to continue on. It doesn't need to happen. Yes, divorce is unfortunately a fact of life, but it doesn't need to be the way that situations like Ulysses have had. So, hold your head high. And if you're going to go through a divorce, keep in mind you don't want to be the one doing this either. So, on that note, thank you for watching the show. Make sure you give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. And do me a favor, please share this. We're trying to spread the word, as we talked about during the show. We're trying to help as many people as we can to understand the realities and what happens when these type of allegations, when the silver bullet is used, because it affects not just the people involved, but the people around them. And unfortunately, the children are usually the ones that suffer the most. And subscribe to the channel, all right? I have a new podcast that comes out every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern. Topics vary. This week it happened to be about false allegations in a divorce situation. But I have all different issues that men and boys are facing. And if you hit the notification bell, you'll get notified when that podcast goes up each week. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on Men Need to Be Heard.